This is the one I wanted to show you. Oh, awesome. I know, it's like the thing that you love. So isn't it awesome? I laughed so hard. But I laughed so hard when I saw it. I did. I mean, I did something.
If I can have your attention. And welcome to our Boundary Committee meeting. We'll get into introductions in a minute and talk about lots of stuff. But before we get started, I wanted Cynthia Armstrong, who's one of our school board members. She had a few words to say this morning, so thank you for being here.
No problem. I'm really here just to thank the committee for taking the time to come in and do this. This is a tried and true process that we have done in this district for many years, and it really affords a lot of transparency in the process with all the different people we have from teachers, teachers, community people, parents, district staff. We really have a process that's going to look at this rezoning from all stakeholders' views, And I know all the hard work that you're going to be putting in, looking at all the different factors that go in with rezoning. I know the deliberate work you're going to be doing here to come up with a recommendation to the school board. So I'm really here just to thank you. We can make sure that you know we recognize all the hard work that you're going to be putting into this process. And I will not a member of this committee, so I will be leaving you to your task. But thank you again for your service.
All right. So I'm going to thank you as well in a minute, but before we do that, I wanted to just go around and have everybody introduce themselves and say what your role is, whether you're a parent, whether you're a principal, whether you're a staff member, whatever. We still have a couple people who were running a little bit late, so they'll be joining us in a few minutes. But my name is Chris Williams. I'm the Director of Planning for the school district, and we'll be helping facilitate and chair the committee. And so, welcome. We'll start here.
I am Joanne Papanekis, and I am a parent from Gulf High School.
I'm Kim Davis, and I'm the principal at Gulf High School.
I'm Tony Midtoon, and I'm a parent at Mitchell.
I'm Jessica Schultz. I'm the principal at Mitchell High School. Michelle Williams, principal at Ancliffe High School.
Carrie Winans, parent from Ancliffe High School.
Jennifer Pickering, parent from Ancliffe High School.
Hi, I'm Katana Pastino, and I sub with Pasco County, and I'm also a parent here at Pasco County with River Ridge Middle School and High School.
Spencer Pilot, Communications and Government Relations.
Gary Sawyer, Transportation.
Betsy Kuhn, Assistant Superintendent for Support Services.
Danielle Rice, parent, Ridgewood High School.
Donna Leonard, parent, Ridgewood High School Days.
Angie Murphy, I'm principal at Ridgewood High School.
Brian Corley, parent, River Ridge High School.
I'm Tony Zacci, I'm the principal at River Ridge High School.
I'm Amy Cohen, I'm a fourth generation proud Gulf High School parent.
Pete Amarito, parent, Paul R. Smith Middle School. Golden Infant, principal, Paul R. Smith Middle School.
Angelina Nagy, parent from Paul R. Smith.
Dave Davis, parent, River Ridge Middle School.
John Hoffmeister, parent, River Ridge Middle. I'm Marcy Hetzler-Nettles, principal, River Ridge Middle School.
Trina Wiegand, parent at River Ridge Middle School.
David Goldstein, parent, Seven Springs Middle School.
Chris Dunning, principal at Seven Springville.
Tammy Berry-Helm, area superintendent for the Southwest region.
I'm Bob Andrews, parent of Gulf Middle School and Gulf High School.
Jason Jones, principal, Gulf Middle.
Derek Delgado, parent, Gulf Middle School.
All right, well, again, welcome. Also have with me, we have Richard Tonello from the Planning Department. Zach Goodfield, our GIS analyst, is on his way. And also have Linda Cobb from Communications Department. Yes, ma'am?
I just want everyone to know that we are Facebook Living this meeting on the district Facebook page.
Great. And so Mr. Andy Dunn is from Communications, and he's here doing that, so appreciate him being there. Dave Skanga is one of our area superintendents, so appreciate him being there as well. Thank you to the public for being here. And again, just as a reminder that you're welcome to observe. Thank you for being here. But there's not going to be any public input or communication from you to the committee today. And so the committee's job is to communicate amongst themselves. Also, we just had somebody else come in. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi. I'm Michelle Gessling. I am one of the high school representatives for Ridgeville High School.
Okay, welcome. So there's a lot of stuff to go through before we actually get to the task at hand. And so bear with me, because there's a lot of background information we're going to go through.
Team 6G, please make your way to the administrative conference room. 6G team, in the administrative conference room.
We're going to inundate you with a lot of information, and that's okay, because we want you to have the tools you need to make the decisions you need to make. I take this job very seriously. Rezoning impacts people's lives, it impacts students' lives, it impacts families' lives. And so again, I take it very seriously. We don't approach this lightly, and I trust that you don't either. And so it's not an easy thing. But the reality is, the superintendent and the school board have determined that because of our overcrowded conditions at Mitchell and Seven Springs and undercrowded conditions at other schools, that we need to do a rezoning and try to spread those populations out as best as we can and try to provide room for future growth and capacity. And so that's what your task is. And again, I'm going to give you a lot of details, a lot of stuff for you to look at to help you with that task. I want to thank you for your service. It's a lot of time, and it's a big commitment, and it's a lot of sacrifice. And so I want to thank you for doing that. And I can't thank you enough, and I'll probably not thank you enough, but while I'm thinking about it, I want to thank you for doing that. Because the district and the school board, as Ms. Armstrong said, really appreciate the fact that you're volunteering your time to do it. And again, as I said, this is no easy task for a number of reasons. Because what you do impacts lives potentially for several years. Who has been a part of a boundary committee or rezoning committee? I know a couple of our principals have. All right, great. We have a parent who has. And so you guys are the veterans. As I mentioned, what you do impacts lives. There is, people will be emotional about it, which is great. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, you as a committee, unfortunately what that can mean sometimes is you will get criticized. It's one thing to challenge or question. I appreciate that. I appreciate folks who question me or challenge me. That's fine. But unfortunately, part of this could be that people will criticize you. And so I want to warn you ahead of time. Again, what you undertake is no easy task. I encourage you, as my predecessor used to tell me, because I started doing boundaries back in 2004. And so when I first came to planning, the first thing I was tasked with was go do a rezone, go do a boundary. And so I encourage you with what he told me, and try not to take it personally. Okay? That's all I can tell you. Try not to take it personally. Again, this is my 12th year of doing it. I've been accused of all kinds of evil things. But I will tell you that at the end of the day, that I want to do what's best for all kids in this area, number one. I want to make this process as transparent as possible. And also that we make data-driven decisions. And so those are the three things that I want as possible. And also, I want you to be open to things that maybe you haven't thought of. my staff will tell you that there have been many boundary committees where I've come in, and as the planner, I have in my head what I would envision the boundary to look at. But many times that boundary has not come out the way I would envision it, because that's your task. And so I would encourage you to have those same goals in mind. To number one, to realize that you want to be transparent, you want to make data-driven decisions, and what was the other thing? You want to do what's best for all kids in this region. Okay? So I encourage you that at the end of the day, if you can get to the end of the process, that somebody can look at what the work that you did and said, you know what, I don't agree with that, but I understand why you made that decision. And so that's our goal. So that's your goal, that's my goal, and hopefully at the end of the day, that's where we wind up. Let's see. All right, so what that means is also that, like I said, you need to be open to looking at things from a different perspective. And what I tell every committee that I work with, and I want everybody to pay attention, that if you came in with some agenda saying, I'm going to make sure that this community here doesn't get rezoned, please leave that at the door. Because we're going to look at all different scenarios and all different communities, and you need to decide, based on our criteria, whether those communities make sense to be rezoned or not. Oftentimes, we've had folks who have been on our committee, who have been in those areas, and they said, you know what, I came in, didn't want my community to be rezoned, but you know what, after looking at the data, that's what made sense. That's what should be done. And so that's why, oh, that's lots of stuff.
Yeah, we have a Dell computer.
I'm sorry, Chris. So, again, please do your best. That's not to say you don't have an opinion, but you need to do your best to look at all the data we provide you and make decisions accordingly. So that's your challenge as we move forward. So let's explain why we're here, okay? It's obvious, because you're part of that, maybe. If you haven't been in Pasco County very long, it's obvious that Pasco is a high-growth area. You mentioned you're a fourth generation. So I'm a fifth generation Pasco County person. Probably more than most people, I can tell you what the growth has been in Pasco County. Grew up in Lena Lakes, now live in Dade City, been through a rezoning myself, and so I understand that. So why are we here? There's a lot of growth in the 54 corridor, and we as a district are struggling to stay ahead of that. There's a lot of challenges involved with that. Currently, we just opened this year the new Wiregrass Elementary School in West of Chapel, in order to relieve a bunch of our elementary schools over there. We're currently building a brand new high school on Old Pasco Road to provide relief for the middle schools and high schools in that area. We're building another elementary school in the Bexley Ranch community to provide relief to our central area elementary schools. Some of you say, well, why not here? Well, unlike here, because here there are some undercrowded schools neighboring some overcrowded schools, we don't have that opportunity in Wesley Chapel and Lima Lakes. So we had no choice but to build additional capacity to provide relief. And so as a district, as we grow, those are some of the things we look at. We look at a variety of things. Does it make sense to build extra capacity? Does it make sense to rezone? Does it make sense to add a wing? Those are all things that we continually look at and provide for. We as a district will continue to seek ways to better pay down, I want you to get this number, our over $400 million in capital debt. $400 million we have in capital debt as a result of building new schools. So we've built over 10 schools in the last 10 years to keep up with the growth. We struggle to not only build additional capacity to maintain, stay ahead of growth, but also maintain our older facilities. River Ridge is several years old, is probably in need of some remodeling. Gulf High, same way. Those are schools that, and Gulf Middle, we've done some work out. That's right, that's right. Built in 1961. So again, that's a struggle we will continue to have. A couple of things to keep for you to keep in mind today as we move forward, and as you make decisions. We will grandfather rising seniors. So that means if there are students who are going to be seniors next year, they will not be part of the rezoning. They will not be moving. Secondly, as far as school choice, our tradition is, and we'll continue with this, anytime we touch a school with rezoning, all school choice is reset. So if we send kids to wherever, we send any kids to Ridgewood High or Gulf High or do any rezoning with Mitchell or Seven Springs, whatever the case, all school choice is reset. So that means everybody will have to reapply. All right? All right, that's quite a bit of information to start with. Any questions before we pass out your packets and start looking at that offhand?
Sure.
Yes?
You already answered this question to me, but who are we making our recommendation to?
Okay, great question. And that, and thank you, because that brings me to the other thing about speaking about sunshine, which I haven't done yet. So you as a committee are basically a committee that's set up by the superintendent and the school board. And so that means you're operating in the sunshine, and I'll get to that in a minute. But you as a committee are tasked with coming up with a proposal for rezoning, and you are going to make that recommendation to the superintendent. And the superintendent's going to review it, and then he could choose not to do anything, or he's going to send it to the school board ultimately. And then ultimately the school board will take a look at it, review it. They could vote it up, they could vote it down, they could send it back to the committee. It's up to them. And so as a committee appointed essentially by the superintendent and school board, you are operating under the sunshine. And so what that means is we have a public meeting. It's open to the public to observe. Also, we take minutes, we take notes, we post the packets online. And so, but also what that means is operating on the sunshine, that 3 or 4 of you can't go off in secret between now and the next meeting and formulate a plan and try to figure out, hey, let's come up with our own plan and then kind of hijack the committee. And so basically you're not supposed to be discussing boundaries amongst yourselves outside of what we're doing here. That doesn't mean you can't go talk to your neighbors about boundaries or talk to your friends about boundaries. But 3 or 4 of you, or 2 of you, shouldn't be getting together talking about the boundaries and talking about strategy on how those boundaries should work. Okay? Any questions on that? Yes?
Do you have a time frame that you would like to see this?
Yep, I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay.
Great question. Yes?
You said rising seniors are not affected. What about their siblings?
So, with school choice being reset, if you want a sibling to stay, that you would have to do school choice. And so then that's back to availability of seats and class size and all that good stuff. So could be, might not.
Could split a family potentially.
That's correct.
Okay.
Could very well be. Yes.
What triggers this? Is this at the discretion of the superintendent of the school board based on over and undercrowding, or is there a specific formula?
There's it's reviewed every year. And so looking at the overcrowded, undercrowded, and what are our options. And so again, it's an ongoing thing as growth happens. And so then it's the superintendent and staff, myself included, looking at the numbers and saying, okay, we're at a point where we need to move forward with the rezoning in order to mitigate the overcrowding. Provide room for future growth and to keep from having to expend money on adding portables or whatever the case. Yes?
Does the superintendent ever change the recommendation of the committee to his own?
I don't recall superintendent, but the school board has. So the school board's seen a recommendation, and between the first reading and the second reading, which I'll get to, they have said, we want you to go tweak a couple lines. So they have the ability to do that. Yes?
Is it possible that multiple maps go forward? I was told that sometimes the board gets multiple maps, but if we have a couple ideas, they all work, but maybe we can't decide between us which one's the best one. The multiple maps.
Most of the time, we come up with one preferred option, but like last year, there was a group who was pushing a different option, and so we provided that map to the school board so they could see what the other option that was being pushed. Yes?
Chris, will you look at grandfathering any other kids besides seniors in this move? For high school or?
We can talk about it. We would have to look at the numbers. And so my note taker back there could write that off. What we're going to do is if there's some concerns or questions like that we want to address maybe after we've kind of looked at some scenarios, then certainly we could come back to that and talk about that.
I have a second to that. What about the programs? Medical for Mitchell, ROTC, I understand there's ROTC at all. But I know they're not the same specific, they're different Army, Navy, Air Force. Would that even be considered?
So is there a principal or area superintendent who can help me with that answer?
It comes down to the individual student.
Okay.
So if there's program need and IEP or something like that, it's all individualized.
So it's basically still goes back to the choice.
If an IEP is driving a placement, then you wouldn't have to apply for choice.
Okay.
But
what
if
about
it's,
the other
like
programs?
an ROTC or something.
Then it probably would go back to choice.
Okay.
But then you would state in the choice application your reasons.
Okay.
And if it's a particular program and that isn't available at another school, then that's taken into consideration. All right, good questions. Any others? Okay, we're going to pass out our packet. Okay. This has been posted online, by the way. Yep, I think so.
Oh, no, one for all. Sure. Do you have one each then? Is it one each?
One packet each.
Oh.
All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to, I'm going to walk you through this packet. It'll take a little time, so again, bear with me. But I want you to understand what you're looking at, and hopefully it provides the tools and resources you need to help you do your work. And so as we go, if you have questions, please stop me and ask me. I'll try to explain it, but sometimes I forget or get going too fast. So the first one is just our agenda for today. We're going to talk about the timeline, which you asked about. We're going to talk about the purpose. We're going to talk about guidelines that you're going to use. So our goal as a committee is you're going to look at, review, and alter the Southwest secondary school boundaries in order to redistribute the populations between overcrowded and undercrowded schools, and to provide for future growth as much as possible. We can't fix the entire problem today. We can't fix the entire problem, all the growth that's coming. Like I told, with the new high school we're building in Wesley Chapel, GGG. We found the other day when they were tackling how to do that rezoning. And I said at the end of the day, when we build the brand new high school and we come up with a rezoning plan, that we will more than likely, most of those middle schools and high schools over there will be still at or near capacity. And that's unfortunate. But that's how overcrowded those schools are. Hopefully, here, we will find that most of the schools wind up under capacity. We may not. Depends on what the solution is. But again, we're not going to necessarily be able to provide for all the future growth that's coming. That's not the goal. The goal is to at least try to redistribute the populations, figure out where the future growth is going to go, and try to accommodate that as much as possible until such a time as the school district can build additional capacity or provide other options. Today's task, I'm going to have you do in a couple minutes, I'll talk about this as we go, is we're just going to start by identifying areas that have potential for being rezoned. And then secondly, if we have time at this meeting, may not be till next meeting, is we're going to develop draft boundaries or multiple options for revised boundaries. But again, we have potentially 3 meetings, and so I'm going to go to this timeline that you have. So this is our first meeting. I'm not going to go through this word by word, but we've talked about the overview of the school development process. We're going to talk about your role. We've talked about some important issues. We're going to provide you lots of data. We're going to talk about school boundary changes. And then we're going to set the next steps for the next meeting. One thing that we will need to do before we leave is we have several meetings scheduled. We have 3 boundary meetings if we need them. We have a parent meeting scheduled, but we will need to schedule a follow-up meeting after the parent meeting in order to come back together and discuss feedback and input we've heard from the parent meeting and decide if you want to change anything. So that's something new that we're doing this year. I did it last year when we did Wiregrass Elementary. Although we didn't get back together, we kind of did an email exchange. But once you have a proposal, we have a parent meeting. You're going to hear some input, and then that might cause you to want to change something. I will tell you that usually the committee do such a fine job of vetting all those things that most of the input you hear, you've already heard or already discussed or already talked about. But we want to have a follow-up meeting just to make sure, because there might be something that you want to alter or change. And so October 5th, today, is the first meeting. October 26th is the second meeting of this committee, and you will continue the work that you did in this meeting. If you get done on the second meeting, great. If you don't, no problem, because then November 7th will be the third meeting. So hopefully by November 7th, you would at least have your proposal that you want to send to the superintendent. And again, prior to the school board meeting, we would have a follow-up meeting. November 14th is our parent meeting that we have set up at River Ridge Middle High School at the Performing Arts Center. That's going to what you come up with will be at that parent meeting. We'll invite all the parents to come. I'll stand up and talk about the process, just like I did now. We'll show what the proposal is. We'll open it up for questions about the boundaries or programs at various schools. And then we'll answer all those questions as best we can and take any input or feedback. As we develop these proposals and plans, we'll post those on the web as well as make maps available to the schools as you need them. And then we have some stuff down there. So potentially December 20th is the first public meeting for the school board. It's called Adopting a Rule. So the school board holds 2 public hearings, a first reading and a second reading. So December 20th is the first reading, and January 17th is the second reading. And so the parent meeting and those 2 school board meetings are additional opportunities for public input on the boundary process. All right, any questions on that? Okay, School Boundary Committee, just real quickly, your purpose, again, is to develop and recommend to the superintendent and school board proposed new school attendance boundaries that best meet established guidelines, which we'll go through in a minute. You're to provide direction and advice to us. Us is primarily the planning department and staff. If you see something on the map and you want something, you need additional information, you ask us, we'll get you that. Review and critique the work that we've done. If you see something that's askew that you think you want us to double check, we'll do that. And then you as committee members are representing students, parents, communities, schools, and the district. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, keep that in mind. You're representing a lot of folks. So you want to make the best decision possible for all the students in our area. You're making a commitment to attend all meetings and participate in communicating with the community. If perchance there's a parent who didn't make it today, they don't get to come after this, because it's too hard to go back and try to do that. I did that once. And so please make it a point to be here. You're going to provide feedback to us. You're going to assist in identifying critical issues. You're going to help us with communication. If you want to, you can do presentations to your SAC or your PTAs, and also provide for rumor control. It's amazing how much rumor goes on. So you can say, I'm on the committee and this is what we're doing. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. So guidelines. These are important. Quick little story. So yesterday at the school board meeting, a gentleman got up, spoke to the school board. Got up and said, well, as you do this process, you ought to have guidelines that you follow. And that you ought to be able to look at areas on the map and decide whether they follow the guidelines to go to a particular school or not. And then base your proposal on that. And then when you're all done, if people will look at it, they should be able to say, hey, I may not like it, but I understand why the committee did what they did. They sat down and everybody clapped. And I wanted to clap because you know what? That's this process. That's what we do in this committee, is we look at these guidelines, look at all the areas on the map, and figure out what makes sense to go where. And so here are the guidelines. And no, I didn't run home after that meeting and make them up last night. We've been using these same or similar guidelines for over 12 years. First one, and these are not in order of importance, okay? I'll get to that. So the first one, socioeconomic balance. We try to provide a balance of racial and economic diversity. You're not going to get perfect balance, but we want to look at it. Okay? We want to try to make sure that a school who has, say, 60% free and reduced doesn't all of a sudden become 10% free and reduced, or 90% free and reduced. So you want to take a look at that. We look at feeder patterns. What's a feeder pattern? A feeder pattern is where all of an elementary school, ideally, all of an elementary school would feed into one middle school, and all of that one middle school would feed into one high school. That's an ideal feeder pattern. It's great when we can accomplish that. We can't always accomplish that, but feeder patterns is a guideline. Future growth and capacity. We want to appropriately provide for future growth and optimum utilization of our schools within the proposed boundaries. Again, we're not saying we can fix the whole problem by this rezoning, but we want to provide as much as we can. Transportation. That's why transportation is on the committee. We want to look at proximity to schools. We want to look at how to provide safe and efficient transportation of students to and from school. Subdivision integrity, that's keeping neighborhoods together as much as possible. I always chuckle at this point because people have different definitions of neighborhoods. Some are bigger, some are smaller. So as a committee, that's what you have to wrestle with sometimes. Maybe it's all one subdivision, but maybe there's some major roads within that big subdivision and it makes sense to divide that. Maybe it's a subdivision that has all kinds of gated communities. Maybe each gated community is a neighborhood. Or maybe you want to keep it all together. Is there a right or wrong? No, but that's what you as a committee have to wrestle with and talk to. Planning integrity, and what that means is what we're doing is, to the extent possible, we're trying to consider long-term school construction plans and other rezonings. So we don't want to do something and then be back at this table 2 years from now and rezone a high schooler who got rezoned as a freshman. We don't want to do that. But on the flip side, I can't guarantee that somebody who was rezoned in elementary school won't, in this high-growth county, might not face rezoning again when they're in high school. That's a possibility. But we try to make sure that if we rezone you in elementary school, you don't ever get rezoned in elementary school again. And likewise, middle or high school. Now, again, these guidelines, you will find, may conflict with one another at times. That's your job as a committee person. Is going to have to figure out what is more important in certain cases. Sometimes it'll be more important to keep the feeder pattern together. Sometimes it'll be more important for transportation. Sometimes it might be more important for future growth and capacity. We might break the feeder pattern in order to provide for future growth and capacity. And I guarantee you, when you make whatever proposal you do, there will be people who tag onto one of these and say, your proposal is breaking the feeder pattern. And you guys can say, yep, it does. But we chose that this guideline was more important in that case. And so again, it's hard. But that's part of your role, is to figure out which one is more important in certain cases. Okay? Any questions on these guidelines? All right. Moving along. Got a bunch of spreadsheets that look like this. Okay? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Not going to go through it line by line. But basically what we do is show you, the principals are used to seeing this because I send them this every year. And they tell me whether I'm right or wrong. Right, Jessica? Yep. And this is our projections that we provide to the schools every year. And say, this is how many students we expect you to have next year. And so what this is if we did no rezoning, none at all this year, that this is the initial projection on what we would expect to see at each of the schools next year. So you can look. So there's a 2017 column. That's for the 2016-2017 school year. That's this school year. And then over on the right, you see a 2018 projected ADM. That's average daily membership. And then the projected growth. So, looking at Gulf Middle, according to their first average 20 days, they have 873 students. If we did no rezoning, we expect them to have 951 next year based on what their current growth trends are. Okay? River Ridge Middle. Currently at 1062, we project them to be at 1094. Seven Springs Middle. Currently at 1649. We'd expect them to be at 1769. Paul R. Smith Middle, 919. We'd expect them to be at 922. Anclote High, 1339. We'd expect them to be at 1299. Gulf High, 1285. We'd expect them to be at 1327. Mitchell High, 2195. We'd expect them to be at 2361. Ridgewood High, 1055. We'd expect them to be at 1023. River Ridge High, they're at 1608. We'd expect them to be at 1652. Some of this may be as a result of growth. Sometimes it's a function of there might be a big, maybe there's a big 7th grade class, okay? An overly sized 7th grade class, and it kind of, you can see it. Let's say there's a huge 2nd grade class, and over the years you can watch that 2nd grade class just kind of march through, and as it gets to middle schools, all of a sudden the middle school population kind of jumps up a bit because of this big class. But then when it leaves the middle school and goes into high school, all of a sudden the middle school population kind of drops off a little bit, just because of that great big class. But in the high school, all of a sudden it picks up. So you see some of that going on. All right? Yes?
Why do we not have numbers for Pasco Middle?
Because Pasco Middle isn't a part of our committee. I mean, we can certainly provide you with their numbers. The capacity numbers?
The Ridgewood High, the Pasco Middle isn't included in Ridgewood?
Yes, it does, but when we were looking at it, because of the feeder patterns, that we didn't think it would be effective. But we can certainly provide those numbers to you. What? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So Pasco Middle School, they actually just went through a rezoning last year a little bit.
A couple years ago.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. Last year was a Bayonet Point Middle.
Yeah. So pretty much everything north of that of Ridge and that's all mostly Pasco Middle as far as that. What we're talking about for the Ridgewood would be like more Gulf Middle kids coming up, and we get a small group of Gulf Middle kids, but that's really the area that we're looking at more so than the Pasco section.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then you have a West Side summaries page. West Side summaries page. You see that? So let's talk about that a second. So this shows your top set of rows, you have the high school data. Bottom set of rows, you have the middle school data. So going across the columns, you see perm cap. And so that stands for permanent capacity. That means capacity without any portables. So looking at the top one, Anclote High, their capacity is 1,684. They don't have any portables, but that's their capacity without any portables. Okay? Enrolled students. That's how many students are at their school as of whenever we took that snapshot of that. Boundary students. That's how many students live in the boundary. Over and under capacity, That's the number that they're over and under capacity based on how many students live in the boundary. So Anglo High is at 93% of their boundary capacity. That means, again, using that 1569 number. Then also you see their low income. How do we measure that? That's based on number of students who are free and reduced lunch. You also see their minority percentage. And you can also see the students who have exceptional student education. All right? So you can look at that for every school on our list. All right? Any questions on that? Probably want to stick that aside because that'll probably be something you want to refer to frequently. Not aside, but in a place you can see it pretty readily. Yes.
I have a question regarding the ESE boundary.
Yep.
Percentage. Does that include special programs?
Special programs as in?
So I use different ESE special programs that are assigned to schools, which is the ESE boundary for that program, but they wouldn't necessarily be in the colored map.
They are students who live in your boundary.
Okay, so those numbers wouldn't necessarily reflect the true number of ESE students at various schools.
Correct.
Okay. Is it possible for us to get those numbers?
Yes. Yep. Yes.
So if a school has a higher enrolled students than a boundary student, is that because of school choice, or how do you have that?
Good question. So the question is, if a school has more students than what's in their boundary, that's based on part of that school choice. Part of that is they might have, like Michelle was talking about, an ESE program where students are coming in because it's a special ESE program that isn't at other schools. And so they're coming in to take that particular ESE program. Okay? Could be school choice because of other special programs, like a career academy at a high school, or the IB program at Gulf High, or the engineering academy at River Ridge, or whatever the case. Could be any number of reasons, those reasons. But yes, part of it would be school choice.
But also private and charter schools?
No. Is that your question?
So we're not when they students...
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, you are correct. So especially for middle schools who are going to, if they're live in your boundary, potentially, they're going to a private or charter school. Yes. Yes.
Are you looking at census data at all, just to see how many kids are actually in the district versus what are enrolled in the program?
We are not looking at census data. What we do is we pull the actual data from our student system and plot it to our map. So it is actual live data from our student system. So if we know about that student, they're in our system. Now, if they're a private student, we might not know about them. But if they're a charter school student, we would know about them.
But we would be able to, we would know those whose school choice out of the county. Because there's actually the articulation agreements between Hillsborough, Pinellas, Fernando. In order for a student to enroll in, is it public
Right.
or private, or is it just public in those?
Just public.
Just public.
But if they are choicing out of the county, then correct. We would not have that record. Because in other words, they're not in our student system, because they're not in our schools. They would be in Hillsborough County system, and so we wouldn't have record of them. Yes.
For Gulf and River Ridge, is there any way you can give us the numbers of how many of them are in IB or academy?
Yes, I think so. So Gulf or River Ridge, you guys know off the top of your head, or can you get the number in your IB program and your academies?
We're currently sitting at about 275, between 275, 290 in our IB program, but they're not all from, some of them are from our school and from our zone. I don't have a breakdown right now as to which one's coming from which school, but I could look into that.
I'll be able to break it down.
You can break it down.
Are we talking about only on school choice or students registered into academies that are within our boundaries?
Question being?
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how many, the capacity of those school comments is the IB program, regardless of the location. That's my main question.
Yeah, we're sitting at about 275 right now and 912 in our IB program. And then I have a naval ROTC that we really don't bring anybody in, it's just our zone. And then I have the only gaming academy in Pasco County, so I do bring in a few people from outside of our region for the gaming simulation academy, and then I have a health careers academy, which is similar to everybody else, so I don't pull in many from there. So the two programs that I would pull in from would be my gaming academy, and I'd say that's probably less than 30 kids from outside of my region total, and then 275 are sitting, 280 are sitting in the IB program.
Do we know for the River Ridge High Academy how many?
Well, the River Ridge High Academies we had about 200 and, I wouldn't want to say 220 on school choice that were in academy programs or were already grandfathered in. I think what we sat with at the end of the summer was closer to about 170. But in the academy programs themselves, we have over 600 kids in academy programs, different academy programs. We have a SciESIS program that is that serves the northwest and southwest regions, so it serves the whole west side of the county, and that has grown. We've doubled in numbers, so we're right around 40 or so kids, maybe close to 50 by now, because the student who is pregnant or has a child is able to register, but also the father of that child is able to register. So that program there's a lot of movement in that program.
Chris, can we request, I think it's related to what you're asking, on that boundary student column, can we request a breakdown of the students who are at those schools on school choice? Because that would be relevant to anybody who's outside the current zone that we would be looking at, and also a separate number for possible charter private schools.
Hey, you gotta get on to the academics. It's a different student every day.
So repeat your question.
The column where it has boundary students, if we could get a breakdown of how many of those students are school choice, and then charter public school, private school. Because school choice should include, and the ESC special programs. Because school choice should include, if I'm not mistaken, IB.
No, they don't have to fill out
They
our
do
school.
not.
No, they apply to the
Okay.
IB program at the two schools in Cambridge. And then once we've accepted them into the IB program, then we put them into,
Okay.
we notify school choice.
And then maybe
there.
that
So
number.
it's not a school choice process first. So my other programs are definitely school choice first.
We won't be able to provide the private school number, because again, we don't necessarily have record of that, but we can, there's another spreadsheet we'll get to, the big spreadsheet, and so if that doesn't have what you need, we can certainly
Is it the
provide.
out-of-county number then?
We can tell you kids who are coming in from the county, but I can't tell you students who are.
Don't they have to?
I thought they had to register.
Yeah, I do have that information. Yeah,
I don't have it, but somebody has
Great.
it.
Yeah, the choice office has that.
Yes.
Why would schools that are over capacity have any choice students?
So some are for employees who want to have their kid with them. Some are special programs, again, that aren't offered at other schools. IEP, which Tammy mentioned, which isn't really a choice, But if there's a special program for ESE that's at a school that's not at other schools, they're gonna go there. Any others that I left out, principals or?
And it should only be those students because.
Well, once the keep in mind it's a year by year basis. So let's say this year there are seats available for school choice. Okay, whatever. Let's say there's 20 seats available, and so school choice people come in and they might allow 20 kids in, but they're also looking at kids who are going out. And how many seats is that create? So let's say they allow 20 in. Okay, so then the next year, let's say the school's full. Okay, and now school choice is closed. All right. Well, those 20 are still there. They're not getting kicked out. They're allowed to stay there until they graduate. But then, other school choice might be accommodated for, again, special programs or employee, those kind of things. So it's closed for the vast majority of people, but there are some who still come for those kind of reasons. Principals, is that accurate? Okay. Yes.
I just also disagree, but just for clarification, the boundary students that it says 1569 does not include census data, but somehow the census data is saying there's 1,800 high school age kids in that area. I can't look at that and try and figure out what's going on there. Because those kids are going somewhere.
Private schools, all what we have is from our student system. Those are actual students that we know about.
Don't forget homeschool kids.
Homeschool kids or kids who stay home and go to e-school, all those things kind of happen. If they do, if they're in like a Florida virtual school or one of the charter e-schools, we have records of that. But if they're homeschool, we don't.
For example, we don't have record of a student who's going to Tampa Prep.
Right. Right.
The other thing I didn't have from school choice this year, and I have each year, is if someone does show that they purchased a home that is being built in a new community, and they're going to move it in October or November, we let them start the year here, so they have a record for school choice as well.
Yep. Okay. Great. Yes.
There also are still some of the opportunity scholarship students from 2 years ago. Their siblings were grandfathered in, and those students are in place due to feeder pattern.
Okay.
They chose.
That's a good point.
So
There's also there's McKay scholarships. I mean, there are a variety of.
Don't forget your SIDS kids who are allowed to remain in the school,
Right.
no longer in that zone.
Students in transition, if they've started a school, they are allowed to stay at the school. I mean, there are a variety of reasons why school choice is given to students.
all right. Good questions. Any others? Yes.
So for Gulf High, if it has an IB program, how do you, when you're doing the projected growth, how do you take into account people that come from elsewhere to go to the IB program?
So once we start a new program, it's always hard to figure that out. But once IB has been there now for how long?
2000 and, the first graduating class was in 2007, so.
Okay. So once it's started and going, we're assuming about the same number of kids are going to come into that program as did the previous year.
So your projected growth numbers include your projections of IB?
That's correct.
And he works with me to
Yes.
see every year, is my enrollment up a little bit, what we're looking at. So they really do communicate with me to find out if I have much fluctuation in my enrollment. But we kind of keep it and look for about the same number each year for capacity purposes in terms of my teaching staff.
It's the timing too, though. The
Yeah.
timing that the middle school kids get their application to apply to the pre-IB, and then the timing of school choice in February. So there's a lot of intentional timing of things so that the numbers are coming in and we have a clear number by April, May.
Right, so we assume the same number, but if Kim calls me and says, hey, we have 25 more kids who applied for IB that is more than what we normally did, we would adjust that number.
Same thing with River Ridge?
Yes.
You do things?
All schools, every school. So those sheets I gave you with projections, That's just a snapshot of this region, but those go to every school in the district. And we talk and say, and the principals say, yep, that's good, or no, we have a change, we're opening a magnet program at Bain Point Middle, and we need to adjust it 100 more. But if we adjust that school 100 more, then I'm looking at other schools saying, okay, where is that 100 coming from? And so we adjust those other neighboring schools down. All right. There's also this spreadsheet that you want to kind of keep handy as as we move forward. This shows you all the different developments, where they're zoned for. So, for example, 01 is Mill Pond. That's zoned for River Ridge High. Currently, there are 53 high school students who live there. And then you're going to see a HS platted, that's high school platted, and a high school unplatted. What that means is if it's a growing neighborhood, look down a few on number 6 where it says Starkey Ranch East. All right, that's zoned for Mitchell High. That has 4 high school students currently in it. And then you see a number of high school platted, 88. So what that means is there are 88 lots that are platted in that subdivision that haven't been built on yet. But if they're platted, that means they could be built on very soon. And that's not, I'm sorry, that's not platted lots, that's number of students, right? That's number of students who would potentially be there once those platted lots are built. Then you see an unplatted number. That unplatted number means those are lots in their development that are future that haven't been platted yet. There's a process a developer goes through when they have a new development. They plat a certain number of lots and build houses on it, and then kids start showing up. But there's a bunch that they haven't platted yet, and that's for the future. So if you see unplatted numbers of students, you know they're coming in the future, but they're not going to be here next year. Probably not going to be here in 2 years. Well, they could be here in 3, 4, 5 years. Okay? But if you see the platted part, the 88, they're coming pretty soon. Maybe the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Depends on how fast they're building houses. Okay? Then you see high school build out. So for that particular thing, we would expect a total of 350 students to be there when it's all built out. At least based on what's approved. Okay? So if there's 4 there now, do the math. 350 minus 4. That's how many more we would project to come. But again, you want to look at that platted versus unplatted, because platted is going to be here sooner than unplatted. All right? So you look through all those, and so as you see those areas on the map, you want to pay attention to those, because that's your future growth that you want to try to provide for. Okay. Okay, hang in there. We're getting there. All right. Got a set of maps for you. This one. This is our high school enrollment. This is based on the first 20 days. 20th day membership, average daily membership. Just to let me, I didn't explain what that term means. Average daily membership means for the first 20 days, what we do is see, for example, Anklo High, how many kids were enrolled on day 1? How many kids were enrolled on day 2? It'd probably surprise you, but that changes literally on a day-to-day basis at all schools. How many kids on day 3? How many kids on day 4? And we look at the first 20 days and average every day, how many kids on average were there the first 20 days. And we count those every 20 days. So we have a first 20-day reporting period, a second 20-day reporting period, a third, on through 9 20-day reporting periods. So this is based on the first 20-day reporting period. And so you can see all the high schools, okay? You can see the percent of capacity they are. So if you look at Anclote High, 80% of capacity based on how many students are enrolled in their school. All right? And then the first number is how many kids are at the school. Second number is their permanent capacity. So 1339 at Anclote, their permanent capacity is 1684. Mitchell High, 2195, their permanent capacity is 1853. So if they're green, they're under capacity. If they're dark green, they're well under capacity. If they're orange, they're over capacity. If they're red, they're really over capacity. If they're yellow, they're a little bit. So you can see the east side, central especially, on high school. And you have the middle school one. A little greener. We like green. But you can see the Wesley Chapel area. That's what we're trying to build extra capacity for now. To help us with John Long, Waitman, and hopefully Rushi. And provide for some future growth. All right. Next.
Chris?
Yes.
So, I'm just trying to reconcile these numbers with so Bayonet Point Middle School, I realize it's not part of this, but you're showing this as 84% capacity, but then when I talked to you, you told me that they're on a wait list for their STEM. So, can you explain why they're showing 84% and then they're on a wait list?
Sure. Great question. So, at Centennial Middle and Bayonet Point Middle, we started a new thing this year, STEM magnet program. They still have a zone. It's not a magnet school, it's a program. And so, and an area superintendent can correct me if I'm wrong. If I say something, make sure you stop me. But that whole school is STEM, but they really were focusing on bringing the sixth graders in. So they brought in a lot more sixth graders than they did anybody else. All right? So if you looked at their numbers, their sixth grade class would be much bigger than their seventh or eighth. So guess what? So next year, they'll bring about the same number of sixth graders in, and now they'll have a bigger seventh grade class. And that school will now be much fuller. And then by the third year, they'll have a bigger eighth grade class, a bigger seventh grade class, and a bigger sixth grade, and they'll all be about the same, but then that school will be full. So that's why they're on a waiting list, because they're trying to do more of that with the sixth grade. Is that accurate? Okay. So they didn't want to, if they took in too many, then they're going to overfill that school in 3 years, which they may anyway.
So I guess this is a follow-up then. So for all the undercapacity middle schools, the Bayonet Point is the only one where that number may not be accurate.
Well, it's accurate as it stands today, but we also are thinking that in 2 more years, that school will be full. If that makes sense.
There's no, I guess what I'm asking for the other 3 that are pretty severely under capacity, Pasco, Gulf, and all that. There's no plan like that would fill it up.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yes.
In that plan, that Bayonet Point would be filled up by students are coming, there's really no growth there for the most part, so they're coming from other schools. Are we taking into account those kids that are already, you're assuming are going to be leaving those other schools to fill up the Bayonet Point? So if they're leaving Mitchell or they're leaving Ridgewood or River Ridge, so there's really more capacity in there than we think, because we're assuming they're going to be going to Bayonet Point.
Correct. So that's part of what the discussion I had about the IB program. We have those similar conversations with the Bayonet Point folks and even Mr. Dunning. I said, how many kids do you think are going to go to that magnet program? And we actually, there weren't many, but what did we do, about 10? I think we took about...
It was originally going to be 10, I think only 6.
Yeah. But we actually, in his projection, we actually took about 10 kids off his projection because we thought they were going to that night.
So the wait list, the wait list you have for the school, do you know where they're coming from? If you know where the people,
Whoever has that list, yes, we would know where they're coming from.
And I'm thinking it's probably mostly in the sixth grade, the wait list.
Yep.
We had a large number of students leaving elementary that wanted to go into it, and so they may reconsider if they didn't get in and stay where they're at currently, but then it would go to a new group, and we don't have that list yet because they reapply for it, leaving their elementary school to now become a sixth grader. We don't have that list because we only went a year out in the application.
All right. All right, so then you have a map that has West Side High School boundary change area. Yeah. Yeah. Don't worry, we had some zoomed in areas coming. All right. So this is kind of the overview map on the high school side. We'll spend a couple minutes and talk about it. Okay? So, for example, let's look at area, like over on the left-hand side of the map, area 29. Okay, there's one big area, 1,420 high school students. See that number in the middle, in yellow? Okay, we have areas that are defined by yellow lines. All right, and we've tried to go in and just define some areas that want to look at. And then you have area 30, which is right there. Okay. That's zoned for Anclote High and has 149 high school students living in it. Those are students who are living in the boundary. Okay? And then if you move to the right, you see area 28, zoned for Mitchell High. There's 9 high school students living there. All right? So that's called a boundary change area. If, as you go, as a committee, if you say, I want to see that boundary change area, I think it ought to be split, we'll split it for you. You think it ought to be split 3 ways, we'll split it 3 ways. You think it ought to be split 4 ways, we'll split it 4 ways. However you think, as you get into it, again, there'll be some closer in views of these, but these are called boundary change areas, and it shows how many students live there that we have record of. And then we have the same thing for middle school. All right. And then this is where we kind of start zooming in a little bit on some different areas. So you got one for high school for Mitchell High, the west area. Then you have West Side Middle School for Seven Springs. Then you have a West Side High School for Gulf High, Ridgewood High, River Ridge area. Another set of boundary change areas to look at. Then there's a set of middle school areas in that same region. All right, so those maps are where you're going to spend the bulk of your remaining time, but I got a couple more to go through. But that's where you spend the bulk of your time as a committee looking at particular areas. Before I let you do that, you also have in your packet this map, which is our feeder pattern map. So again, that's one of our guidelines, right? So when we're looking at boundaries, you want to look at what the feeder patterns are. So kind of the colored areas are the high school boundaries. big, thick blue lines are the middle school boundaries. And those red lines are the elementary boundaries. And the abbreviations are underneath. Okay, so if you're not sure, well, what does CES stand for? You can look at the abbreviation underneath and see that it stands for Cypress Elementary School. All right, so for example, if you're looking at this area, this is your Mitchell High boundary. All right. Oh, by the way, remember I told you how that we, when I do boundaries, they don't always, I mean, they don't. The committee chooses what they choose. I don't always get my way either. See this area down here? I really wanted that to be here. And the committee said, no, it needs to go to Sun Lake and Rushi, which actually worked out very well. But anyway, that's Ivy Lake Estate. So that the Suncoast Parkway runs right here, but this is on the other side of the Suncoast Parkway. So my preference is to make the Suncoast Parkway the boundary line. Anyway, so you have this big area is Mitchell, Seven Springs. So where you see this red line and red line, that currently is Odessa Elementary School, which that boundary is going to change with the opening of Bexley Branch Elementary, or whatever it's called. This boundary line is Longleaf, right? Okay. This boundary line is Trinity, okay? This is Trinity Oaks, all right? So that's kind of how you read that.
Isn't Starkey Ranch, when you say they're opening schools, is that going to affect us?
So eventually it'll affect you. So Starkey Ranch is a brand new development. And so that has, in the future, we'll have lots of houses. So we have planned for that. We have a K-8 school. It's not a true K-8 school. It's going to be an elementary and a middle just on one campus. So it'll be a full elementary and a full middle school. Then we also have a second elementary for the future.
What's that time frame for the K-8 school?
So the K-8 school right now in our 10-year plan is 22-23. And then we are also in the market for a high school site that's going to go somewhere between Mitchell and Sun Lake.
What's that?
Good question. So it's acquisition of the site, and then it comes to budget, and then also.
So, you know, I asked that question because when you look at your high school map, you have 5 high school zones over here, but you have a problem from the central district to the entire west side, which is going to require a complete rezone again in the near future. And if you're talking about planning integrity being part of your goals, but you don't have Land O'Lakes and Sun Lake here, you don't have Hudson here, or 5A here. So that's my question. An entire movement is going to be needed, but we're only talking about 5 zones. Why are they not here?
So Land O'Lakes and Sun Lake, they're in the middle. So they're being squeezed in the middle. And so the problem with them is there is no immediate relief for them. Now what we're doing with Land O'Lakes is we're about to remodel their entire school. So we're going to add some capacity to that school. Sun Lake and also Rushi Middle School, which are in the middle. Eventually, we're going to have a high school in the Bexley Ranch development. We have that promised. We also have a middle school in the Bexley Ranch development. So that's going to provide relief in the future. So what we're doing to provide some short-term relief for Rushi and Sun Lake is to try to provide some relief with the new school that's going on Old Pasco Road with GGG. And so we're hopeful, although that's what the boundary committee over there is struggling with, is how can we get some students out of Rushi and Sun Lake and go to that new school, or go to John Long and Wiregrass. And the problem is that there's too many kids for what our school capacity is over there.
And that's what I'm saying, there's an entire shift that's needed, but those zones aren't represented.
Correct, but again, you have stuff going on the east side that's trying to help alleviate some of that.
You anticipate Sun Lake seeing relief from GGG?
We're hopeful that we can get a little bit, because Sun Lake's boundary goes all the way to the I-75. And so we're hopeful that the GGG boundary will come along the west side of I-75 and pick up some of those kids. The other option they're looking at is, can they get enough kids out of Wiregrass and John Long and shift those kids into Wiregrass and John Long. But you're right, it's a problem. Because I'd like to shift them into GGG, but if we do that, we know that's going to make GGG overcrowded, at least in the near term, until we build the middle school on the GGG campus. Once we build the middle school, then that'll free up spaces to help, and we'll have to do a rezone over there again to try to accommodate those students. So as I said in the beginning, this whole 54 corridor is an ongoing issue to provide capacity. Yes?
Yeah, so the 5A, why isn't that in itself? They're on our side and they are under capacity. And when you look at the whole region in terms of the future growth, the whole thing, I think, needs to be looked at, and it's not here. And if you wanted to look at maybe fixing some of the feeder patterns, you would need that to fix those. If that was a criteria.
Well, 5A's been open how long?
7.
Yeah. So we decided we didn't want to create a domino effect on the whole west side, because it hadn't been that long ago that we touched those. So we decided to leave them alone for now. That was a staff decision.
But you could fix some feeder patterns if you had that.
And you can talk about that, and we can put that as an issue to talk about. Yep. But we were trying to avoid doing, too much of a massive rezoning, because again, if you shift some kids out of River Ridge to the north, or Ridgewood to the north, how much are you going to move north? And again, it creates a huge domino effect.
I guess we're wondering the same thing, just sitting here when we look, we're talking a lot about moving east for a lot of people, and yet we're not speaking about north. And when we look at the 3 schools that are north, and 5A has been open longer than Yanko, but I can see what they're talking about with possibly pushing north, which would be a whole revamping.
There's 12 to 1,400 student capacity on those north schools. as it sits right now.
Right.
Or even looking at some of Land O'Lakes High School.
And then again, sometimes what you look at too, though, is that even though the boundary is like next door, getting kids from here to here is not an easy thing. You also see, if you go across 52, yeah, this is a great big area, but there are a handful of kids here. So even if you cut this area and send them here, it's not a big impact. And so in order to get a bunch of students out of Land O'Lakes, and let's say you wanted to try to provide relief to Land O'Lakes, so let's say you wanted to provide relief to Land O'Lakes, are you going to move all of Connerton to Hudson? That would be a problem, because Connerton's right here by the school, and now you're going to send them here. And so you're going to be looking at these same issues here. Is how far, proximity to school, all those things come into play. Yes?
Can we request that 5A's information be added just so we can add it?
Sure. Yep. We'll get that for you. Yes?
In terms of staff's decision, what was staff's thoughts about if River Ridge became overcrowded because you're moving people to River Ridge, what was staff thinking River Ridge would get moved to? If it's not 5A, what were you?
I think there's some areas you can look at to potentially move to. That's what this group's gonna look at. Is some areas that you can move out of River Ridge to say, go farm.
No, I see that, but I guess I'm concerned that 5A was taken off the table without us even having a chance to think about it. I mean, that's a concern.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
You wanna write that down for me, Dave?
I did.
Awesome. Good.
And so you all have kind of done, for us, a line of demarcation, east side, west side, right? I mean, it seems like Land O'Lakes, Sun Lake is east side, we're west side. I mean, is that how you look at it? Is that what the east side group is doing, starting from Land O'Lakes and moving that way?
Right, so they're actually looking at trying to slice off some of these students and pull into here.
But you want us not to be concerned with Land O'Lakes or considering that as an option or Sun Lake or
Correct.
that line? Okay.
Because you may say, hey, why can't we shift some kids to Sun Lake? Okay, that's legitimate. You know what these guys said? Hey, why can't we shift some kids over here? And so, you know, that's why I say they're getting the squeeze in the middle. Eventually, they'll get relief with the high school in Bexley Ranch.
Well, I think
But
that's
so the question is, how can we get some short-term relief? And the short-term relief, hopefully, is going to be here.
And I think that's why they're saying, okay, let's consider the north. But if we can't go east, we got to go north, or potentially go north.
Right, right.
Okay.
Chris, as a follow-up to my comment, I think Pasco Middle shouldn't have been taken off the table either. I mean, the same concern I have about 5A, I have about Pasco Middle because it's got capacity. Not understanding why it's taken off the table.
We can provide that information for you. All right. Any other questions like that? So here's a couple big spreadsheets. These are really big spreadsheets. Have a lot of numbers on them. Let me explain them. So if you remember the boundary change areas on your map, okay? Boundary change areas on your map. You're probably not going to spend a lot of time here, but I want you to have the raw data that we have. So if you look at a boundary change area on the map, say area number 1, okay? That area number 1 belongs to River Ridge High School. And then if you go across, area number 2 belongs to River Ridge High School. All right? So if you look at area number 1 on the high school, River Ridge High, that's 53 kids live in that area. Of those 53 kids, if you go down the rows, of those 53 kids, there are 18 that are free and reduced. If you go further down their columns, you'll see that of the 53, that are 9 that are minority, and of the 53, there are 8 that are ESE. And then you have the percentages there as well. So any area on the map, you can come back to this spreadsheet and see how many kids, what the breakdown is, how many are free and reduced, how many are minority, how many are ESE. All right. Also on the right-hand side, kind of in the summary columns over there, after all the areas, you see a column that says no match. That just means there was an address we couldn't match to the map. Bad address, wasn't put in right, somehow we couldn't figure out where that was. So there's a handful of those. You also see choice in, choice out. that's not strictly, I want to qualify that, that's not strictly school choice. That could be they're coming in, that means they're coming in from outside the boundary for whatever reason. Could be ESE, could be school choice, could be special program. Some reason they're coming in. You also see a choice out, okay? That's students who are going out of that area for whatever reason, same reason, school choice, ESE, some special program. All right? Then again, you see, like in our summary, you see the total school permanent capacity, you see the total enrolled students, you see the utilization percent based on boundary, you see your boundary area count students, how many live in that area, and you also see the utilization percent and then the over-under capacity. All right? And then this summary page that we did for you, we went through earlier, that's a summary of those kind of columns over there. Yes?
Is it possible to get more specific numbers in the Robert Crown Wilderness area?
Yep.
Okay. There's just there aren't a lot of, it's not as specific as other areas as it relates to, and even like some numbers over like major roads like in Anclote, like over Moog Road, north of Moog Road, how many kids specifically, the Robert Crown Wilderness area specifically, there's it's almost like it's clumped into one whole area.
And again, if you, whatever areas you want us to break out and make smaller, we can do that.
Okay.
So if you define them, like draw them on the map or something, we can do that. All right. Any questions on what I provided? And then once we get those questions, we'll move on to the next step. Yes.
Just going back to the spreadsheet, looking at the input, choice, inputs out. So we get that broken out more. That's really the only one that has so many choicing out and not choicing in. And so if those kids were to reset back, that would almost fill that school. I want to get an idea of what that really is.
Well, I know there's at least 100 that go to Gulf, I believe. But yeah, we can get that for you. Yes.
Can I ask a related question? So Gulf is under capacity, but you have a lot more choice in than choice out, or significantly more choice in. Is that because of IB?
And because we have the only gaming academy in Pasco.
And I assume Anclote and Ridgewood don't have any similar program.
No, sir.
Okay? Any other questions? We gave you a lot of data. Here's what I want you to do. I'm going to let you work as a middle school table. I'm going to let you work as a high school table. So what I want you to do at your individual table is I want you to look at your maps and as a group identify areas that you think have potential for being rezoned. I don't want you to get too bogged down in where or how, but just identify some areas in the current zones that you think would have potential based on the guidelines to be rezoned somewhere. We'll try to get some for you. We also have some markers.
Then we want to write on it.
We can write on. We'll give you a new one. But we'll get some. We'll try to find some.
We would like a touch screen to pick a color and just start
okay, hang on.
them.
There's a question over here.
Go ahead. So it's obvious to me that programs like IB affect attendance. Okay, and stuff. So how do we? I mean, it seems to me some of the problems can be remedied by making some of these under-capacity schools have those types of programs. So what assumptions are we allowed to make as far as the conversion of some of these undercapacity schools to get a program like an IB or a STEM magnet or some attractor type academy that would affect their attendance?
So, you know, I don't know.
I'll add that. I'll
So
add
if you
that
wanna-
here, but,
yeah.
if there is consideration and conversations, but,
So we do talk about that. There's a group that talks about whether it's an IB, whether it's Cambridge, whether it's other magnets, and they address that on a year-to-year basis as to whether they feel like it will fly or not. They also talk about what the startup costs associated with that would be, and it has to be a thing that the school wants to do. There's training involved, and so there's a lot of pieces to that.
So, I guess my concern is how do we as a group take that into account? Like, to me, let me just give you an example. Okay, so you don't have a STEM high school in Pasco County, right?
Correct.
So if you've made one of these high schools, like an Anclote or Ridgewood, STEM, that significantly affects attendance.
Potentially.
In fact, it may not even have a boundary at all, right?
If you did a true magnet, yeah.
So how do we as a group, if there's a possibility of that occurring, which I'm hearing that there's at least a possibility, how do we as a group take that into account about whether you include that school or not in your rezoning calculations?
Well, and like I said, it's something we do on a year-to-year basis. Kim could actually accommodate way more IB students, but they're not showing up. And so,
I'm asking about STEM though.
I understand, but IB is a very high rigorous academic program.
We actually have started with, we are a candidate for what they call the IBCP, which is the International Baccalaureate Career Preparation Program, and we can link it to 3 of our academies. And just to give you an example, the startup funds for us to become an IBCP approved school, we're linking it to our ROTC, my gaming academy, and my health career academy. Just the startup is costing me about $15,000 for an established school IB International Baccalaureate program to do that. So they've given us, so in essence, we will become kind of like a STEM with that particular thing. We just don't call it STEM because it's linked to IBCP or the International Baccalaureate.
Well, the reason I'm asking about STEM is because you have a wait list of standards, which is STEM. You have a wait list of Dana Point Middle, which is STEM. And so clearly creating a STEM creates a demand. I'm not saying that IB doesn't, okay, but it clearly creates a demand just based on the 2 STEM you have. So if that's a possibility of occurring, it affects this discussion. And so I'm trying to figure out how do we, can we create a scenario where one of them becomes a STEM and then draw boundaries based on that, or are we not allowed to do that? That's the question.
No.
I mean, certainly you can.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
In terms of your initial question, the bottom line is, as a committee, you're here to talk about rezoning based on the numbers that we currently have. That idea of creating something that would eliminate or somehow change the decisions this group has to make is long-term and wouldn't affect the work that you're doing.
How long does it take to create a STEM?
Again, money, time, resources, and also that's something we look at every year in terms of programs, whether we have the capacity to build that program and afford that program, and what it would do in terms of attracting or not attracting. So I think the short answer is basically, as a committee, you're here to look at rezoning.
I'm not sure I accept the answer.
Not to try to avoid the rezoning by creating something that, would take a lot of planning and time for us.
How long did it take you to create Dana Point Middle as a STEM?
Those took us multiple years and a lot of money. But again, we don't know, even if we do it, we would already anticipate that's not going to change our need to rezone.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry on that. Sorry. So, my understanding is if you do a rezone, they won't, like you said, rezone again for several years, like at least 4 years, because you don't want kids that are in middle school being rezoned again while middle school. So 3 to 4 years before you could do another rezone. So if you decided to, let's say, make Ankle a STEM school later, which we've been told is maybe possible, you wouldn't even be able to do that because you just rezone a whole bunch of people in and then you have to rezone them back out again. So I think that's part of the concern is if you move people there, then it almost makes it so you can't do it.
But even when you do that, one of the things that you need to remember is you're in a 3 to 4 year time frame. Most kids, when they are planning to choice to a school, it's in a 3 to 4 year time frame. So you're not talking about in the middle of your junior year, because a STEM school opens up, that kids are going to go to that STEM school. Once they hit their freshman year, that 3 to 4 year piece, that window is done. So even if in 3 to 4 years, Antioch became a magnet school for STEM, the students that are currently at that school are not going to be affected. So you're literally not, it is
6 to 7 years.
It is an invalid argument in terms of who it's affecting. It's not affecting those kids. You don't have juniors go into a STEM program. You just don't. It's just not how magnet and STEM programs work. The expectation is that they are completing a program, not starting in the middle. So even for my medical academy, I'm not going to have a kid come in his junior year if he has not had specific requirements. It's going to be very similar for STEM, medical, engineering, insert academy or program here. Even ROTC, it's very difficult for kids to complete those pieces when you're doing that in junior year. So we're not talking about, even if Anclote becomes a magnet in 3 to 4 years, we're talking about an incoming 6th grade group. So it's not going to affect those kids.
Yeah, I'm not thinking about it that. So you move a whole area into there, and then you need to create room for a magnet school. So then, whether they're going to the magnet school or not, you
not necessarily.
A true magnet.
When we opened the gaming academy, what we were charged with, and it took us 3 years of planning for our gaming application academy. What we were charged with is we keep seats for our zone schools. So I have to share with Terry Onchman, I want to say, okay, so I'm reserving 80% of my seats for my children. And I can set those parameters. And then if my 80% isn't filled, then I have that autonomy to pull in. So they're not automatically approved to come into a program. The principal works with CTE and their area superintendents to identify what am I going to do. Land O'Lakes is the same way with their culinary and their IB. So we have that. We're going to make sure we service our children who are zoned for our school prior to letting some of those others come.
So if, let's say, this rezoning fills your school, you can't accept anybody else's ID for overcapacity.
I don't know that I'll ever, well, I don't know. I mean, every year it's a little bit different. Chris has been pretty good over the years since I've been principal of really making those predictions. And it just takes a lot of planning. I don't see it creating that much of an issue for us.
Yes.
So, obviously, being one of the schools that has good capacity of parents concerned about the switch, as parents have been asking me, I've probably had like 30 parents want to be on this committee, get to pick two. I have assured parents that I would share out the information that they have requested, so I wanted to make sure that I did give that to you. Chris has covered most of it, but I'm going to give you a one-page document that just has some of those bullets. Some of them are unrelated, but I wanted to make sure that I did share them out. So the very first one is the idea of the new developments going to another school rather than worrying about that for here. So shifting basically the newer developments that have growth up to a River Ridge, or that was the one that's been brought to my attention. Number 2 and 3 don't really relate to this because this committee is about drawing boundaries, but I did want to share them. And one is about the fact that delaying the decision to rezone. And that's one that's big that a lot of you have heard about. Number 3 is to remove the students who do not live in our zone. I believe that there's a high capacity of students that are both in Mitchell High and Seven Springs Middle that do not actually live in here, but they lie about their address and those types of things. Number 4 is socioeconomics need to be considered, and the fact that basically our primary low socioeconomic is Veterans Village, and that to keep that diversity here in Seven Springs Middle so that we have that diversity, which he obviously covered with our guidelines. And number 5 was the possibility of increasing the capacity at Seven Springs and Mitchell, which has obviously also been talked about as to what that potential would be. Then I had a group of parents that also shared with me a map or a list of addresses that they created showing proximity to Mitchell High School and Seven Springs Middle School. and basically trying to show where the communities are and how far it would be to go to River Ridge or to go to Ankle Pollard, trying to create that sense of community in the fact they also at the bottom put, you know, the shopping area right here is Publix, you know, who is actually shopping there and that type of thing. So I'm just going to pass that off so you guys have, and I've done my due diligence to share out what those parents have requested. Thank you.
All right. We're rapidly running out of time, but I do want to go ahead and split up into groups at least for a few minutes. And we do have some sticky notes now. Thank you to Seven Springs Middle School. Appreciate that. And so please, as a group, talk about some areas that you think have potential to be rezoned. And if we can kind of have, you know, at least somebody keep track of what areas you're looking at. And also keep in mind those areas that are growth, that maybe don't have a lot of kids now, but you know are going to have a lot of kids. You need to talk about those as well and what might have potential to be rezoned somewhere. Okay? Yes.
Can I add one more thing for next meeting as well? There's a lit elementary school. We had to get those numbers to see if that was kind of thing happening or how that affected. Come up here.
Well, I'm a little,